How do you build an empire without firing a single shot? You don't start with a battle. You start with a contract. While other nations bled for glory, America discovered something far more powerful: how to make war profitable. Guns, oil, steel, and debt became the invisible weapons that built a global superpower. For most countries, war means ruin. For the United States, it became the fastest road to power. In the early 1900s, America was still a young giant, powerful, but cautious. Europe ran the world. Britain ruled the seas, and continental powers commanded vast armies and colonies. The US mostly watched from the sidelines. Then came 1914, World War I, the war to end all wars, and the moment America became the world's banker. While Europe descended into self-destruction, America stood aside and got to work. As factories in France and Germany went silent, American mills roared to life. They sold everything: food, weapons, uniforms, steel, medicine. Europe's gold poured across the Atlantic. In just 2 years, the United States transformed from a nation in debt to the world's primary creditor. By the time America joined the fight in 1917, the profit machine was already unstoppable. Wall Street banks financed the Allies, and factories ran day and night. When the war finally ended, Europe was in ruins, but America emerged with unprecedented money, power, and global influence. The age of financial warfare had officially begun. The lesson was crystal clear: you don't have to conquer nations to rule them. You just need to own their debt. After the war, Europe owed the US billions. The Allies couldn't repay without getting reparations from Germany, and Germany couldn't pay without new loans from where? America, of course. It created a perfect loop of debt. The US lent to Germany, Germany paid Britain and France, and they sent the money right back to Washington. It was an elegant, global cycle of debt, all revolving around a single country. It was also incredibly dangerous. And when it finally broke in 1929, the entire world crashed with it. The Great Depression was a global catastrophe, but even in crisis, America found opportunity. The nation rebuilt its factories and regulated its banks. So when war came again, America was ready to profit on an even grander scale. World War II erupts, Europe is once again engulfed in flames. And once more, America begins by selling. Weapons, planes, food, oil, all shipped under the noble banner of defending democracy. The Lend-Lease Act sent billions in supplies to the Allies, often in exchange for future payments or strategic political favors. When the war ended, the contrast was stark. Europe was bombed flat. America's factories, untouched by the fighting, were booming. The US held 2/3 of the world's gold reserves, and its dollar was crowned the new global currency. But the real genius wasn't in winning the war. It was in redesigning the peace. In 1944, at a quiet resort in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, delegates from 44 nations gathered. There, a new world order was born, architected by American bankers and politicians. Every major currency would now be tied to the US dollar, and the dollar, in turn, was tied to gold. With this single move, America didn't just win the war. It won the entire global economy, but power is addictive. When you control the money, you control the future. And America learned that war was the most profitable way to expand that control. The Cold War turned this concept into a business model. The Soviet Union and the US never fought directly, but they spent fortunes preparing for a war that never came. Nuclear arms, jets, missile spies, every year brought more government contracts, more spending, and more debt. The military-industrial complex, a term President Eisenhower himself coined as a warning, became a self-perpetuating machine. Defense was no longer just about protection, it was about profit. The Vietnam War was proof. Fought half a world away, it cost billions, fueled inflation, and kept factories humming. Oil companies, weapons manufacturers, and construction firms all grew fantastically rich. But this massive spending strained the US dollar, leading to another critical turning point. In 1971, President Nixon made a stunning announcement. America was abandoning the gold standard. From that moment on, the dollar was backed not by gold, but by one thing only: trust. It could be printed endlessly. Government debt could grow forever. And the world had no choice but to accept it, because every nation still needed US dollars to buy and sell oil and trade on the global market. It was financial alchemy money created from nothing, supported by the full might of the American military. The wars of the future would be fought not just with bombs, but with bonds. When the Cold War ended, many hoped for an era of peace and stability. Instead, we got privatization. The defense industry went global. American companies began selling weapons, advanced systems, and military training to allies and clients around the world. Every regional conflict, from the Middle East to Africa, became a new business opportunity. War was no longer just a tragedy. It was a line item on a balance sheet. Take the 1991 Gulf War in Iraq. America's swift military victory was also an economic one. It was a live-fire demonstration of its high-tech arsenal for the entire world to see. After the war, nations lined up to buy American jets, missiles, and defense systems. Billions flowed back into the pockets of U.S. defense contractors. And when the same region exploded in conflict again in 2003, the cycle repeated itself on an even larger scale. War contracts, reconstruction deals, oil partnerships, every bomb dropped created another bill to be paid. But the modern twist on this strategy came quietly. In the 21st century, America perfected a new kind of warfare, invisible, financial, and permanent. Sanctions, tariffs, and global debt began to replace armies and tanks. Instead of invading a country, the U.S. could simply cut it off from the global dollar system. A switch flipped in Washington could freeze an entire nation's economy. Every country understood the new rules: play by the system or be excluded from it. This is how the dollar became the new empire. No borders, no colonies, just balance sheets and contracts. America had found a way to turn the world's dependence on money into the ultimate weapon. But there's a dark side to this power. For every contract signed and every profit made, someone pays the price. Ordinary soldiers on the front lines, taxpayers footing the bill, workers and industries left behind. While the system profits, they bear the true cost. The numbers are staggering. Since World War II, the United States has spent over $25 trillion on defense, more than the rest of the world combined. And yet, the national debt keeps climbing. Because war spending doesn't just build armies, it builds credit. Debt itself becomes the engine of empire, an engine that feeds on itself. Still, the formula keeps working. After every crisis, the dot-com bust, 9/11s, the 2008 financial meltdown, the global pandemic, the fear of conflict keeps the system alive. Money floods into defense, surveillance, and technology. The markets recover, profits soar, and the mountain of debt grows ever higher. But what happens when the wars stop being profitable? What happens when the world no longer believes in the absolute power of the dollar? Or when the debt becomes too massive to sustain? These are the questions that history always asks of its great empires, and it rarely answers kindly. Think about the British Empire. At its peak, it ruled the seas and its currency was the world standard. Then came two devastating world wars. Britain borrowed heavily from America to survive, and that debt ultimately crushed its empire. Power shifted across the Atlantic. Today, America stands in that same position, facing the same temptation: the belief that money, backed by military might, can last forever. The belief that wars can always be monetized and that debt can always be rolled over. But history whispers a different truth. Every empire that learned to profit from war eventually drowned in its own wealth. Spain, France, Britain, each one believed its system was unbreakable, until one day it broke. The question isn't whether America will follow the same path. It's whether it will learn the lesson before it's too late. Because behind every financial empire lies the same powerful illusion, that money is power. But power built on war is always rented, never owned. The real wealth of a nation isn't found in its weapons or its banks. It's found in what it creates when there is no war to fight: innovation, trust, stability. These are the things that can't be bought or borrowed. For a century, America has mastered the art of turning conflict into opportunity. But opportunity is not the same as prosperity. A country that profits from war must constantly find new wars to profit from. And someday, there may be none left to fight. When that day comes, the world will see what truly remains when the contracts end, the money stops flowing, and the illusion finally fades. Because in the end, no empire can finance itself forever. And no nation, no matter how powerful, can turn war into wealth without one day paying the price. Thanks for watching. If you found this perspective valuable, consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the systems that shape our world. See you next time.